We've been told a lie for the last 20 years. We've been told that if you want to be healthy, if you want to lose weight, or if you want to avoid brain fog, you have to treat carbohydrates like the enemy. Bread, pasta, potatoes, rice, they've all been demonized as sugar bombs that ruin our metabolic health. But here's the problem. Cutting them out entirely is miserable. It's socially isolating. It's hard to maintain, and frankly, your body actually wants those glucose molecules for fuel. So, what if I told you that the problem isn't the carbohydrate itself, but the way your body encounters it? Today, we are diving deep into the science of glucose biohacking. I'm going to show you 6 science-backed strategies that allow you to enjoy your favorite starchy foods while effectively cloaking them from your bloodstream. We're talking about reducing your glucose spikes by up to 73% without changing the calories you eat. Please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It's a simple way to support my work and helps me continue sharing this research-backed health information with you. By the end of this video, you won't just have a list of tips. You'll have a complete metabolic blueprint. You'll understand how to turn a sugar spike into a glucose plateau, protecting your energy, your mood, and your long-term health. Let's get started. Our first strategy is perhaps the most underrated and cost-effective tool in the metabolic shed, often referred to as the Vinegar Amplifier. Now, I know exactly what's going through your mind. The idea of drinking vinegar sounds like an old wives' tale or one of those questionable wellness trends you see blowing up on social media, but the underlying biochemistry is actually fascinating and deeply grounded in rigorous clinical research. When you consume just 1 to 2 tablespoons of diluted vinegar about 10 to 15 minutes before a carbohydrate-rich meal, you aren't just having a drink. You are essentially pre-treating your entire digestive tract for the glucose load that's about to arrive. The magic ingredient here is acetic acid, and it performs a dual action role that is nothing short of incredible. First, it acts as a temporary off switch for alpha-glucosidase, an essential enzyme in your small intestine responsible for breaking down complex starches into simple glucose. By putting this enzyme on a brief pause, the starches from your bread, pasta, or potatoes aren't converted into sugar instantly. Instead, they enter your bloodstream as a slow, manageable trickle rather than a sudden, overwhelming flood that would normally send your insulin levels into a tailspin. But the benefits don't stop in the gut. Once acetic acid enters your system, it sends a powerful molecular signal to your muscles, essentially telling them to open the gates and start soaking up glucose for fuel more efficiently. In fact, clinical studies have shown that this simple ritual can improve muscle insulin sensitivity by up to 34%, which is a massive win for anyone looking to manage their weight or stable their energy levels. However, as with any powerful tool, the nuance here is absolutely critical. The single biggest mistake people make is falling for the tough it out mentality and taking a concentrated, undiluted shot of straight vinegar. Please avoid doing that at all costs. The high acidity is notoriously harsh on the delicate lining of your esophagus and can permanently erode your tooth enamel over time, which is a high price to pay for a health hack. The professional strategy is to dilute your choice of vinegar. And no, it doesn't have to be the expensive organic stuff. Red wine vinegar, balsamic, or even basic white distilled vinegar works perfectly as long as it contains acetic acid into a large glass of water. A pro tip for the truly dedicated: sip it through a straw to bypass your teeth entirely. By doing this, you keep the metabolic shield active while protecting your physical health. So, now that we've successfully hacked the internal breakdown of your food to prevent that initial spike, we need to turn our attention to the actual substance on your fork. It's time to realize that not all starches are created equal, and the molecular structure of your food can be just as important as the order in which you eat it. Before we move on to the next chapter, I want you to consider this. What if the type of bread you choose for your morning toast actually matters significantly more for your fat-burning potential than the amount you're putting on your plate? Now, let's look at this from a completely different perspective, using an analogy that makes the biology of nutrition much easier to visualize. I want you to think of your carbohydrates not as calories, but as fuel for a campfire. If you throw a handful of dry leaves or tiny bits of kindling onto a fire, you get a massive, blinding flash of heat and flame that roars for a second and then dies out instantly, leaving nothing but cold ash. In the metabolic world, that's refined flour, the white breads, the pastries, and the instant oats. On the other hand, if you place a heavy, dense oak log onto that same fire, it doesn't explode. Instead, it burns low, steady, and slow, providing consistent warmth for hours. That is what we call an intact grain. The core concept we need to master here is the shift from kindling to logs. The problem with modern food processing is that we've become experts at pulverizing grains into ultra-fine dust. When a grain is turned into flour, the physical surface area increases exponentially. This means that as soon as it hits your digestive tract, your enzymes can dismantle it almost instantly. Your body absorbs that glucose in as little as 15 to 20 minutes, causing a violent spike in your blood sugar followed by an inevitable, exhausting sugar crash about 90 minutes later. Conversely, whole, intact grains like quinoa, black rice, or traditional steel-cut oats retain their fibrous hull and complex structure. They require your body to actually do the work of digestion, breaking them down slowly over the course of 2 to 3 hours, which translates into steady, reliable energy without the hormonal roller coaster. To put this into a real-world context, let's look at a few specific swaps that can transform your health overnight. Consider white rice, which has a glycemic index of about 73. Essentially, it's a bowl of pure, fast-acting glucose. If you swap that for black rice or wild rice, the glycemic index drops to somewhere between 42 and 45. By making that one simple switch, you are nearly having the workload on your pancreas. We see the same magic with sourdough bread. Because sourdough undergoes a long fermentation process, the natural bacteria actually pre-digest a significant portion of the starches and neutralize some of the anti-nutrients. This makes it much gentler on your blood sugar levels than a standard, chemically leavened supermarket loaf. However, there is a nuanced layer here where many well-intentioned people get tripped up. The most common mistake is falling for the brown bread trap. In many cases, the bread you see on the shelf labeled as wheat or multigrain is just standard white bread dyed with caramel coloring or molasses to look healthy. To find a true log, you have to look for terms like sprouted, stone ground, or 100% whole grain. The rule of thumb is simple. The less processed and more intact the grain looks, the better it will serve your metabolism. Now, we've optimized the what and the quality of your carbs. But did you know that your body actually changes its fundamental ability to process sugar based entirely on the position of the sun? This brings us to the circadian timing strategy, and it is an absolute game changer for anyone who struggles with late-night cravings or evening brain fog. Our bodies are not static, unchanging machines that process fuel the same way at every hour of the day. Instead, they operate on a highly sophisticated internal biological clock known as the circadian rhythm. One of the most critical players in this system is your pancreas, the organ responsible for producing insulin. And the reality is that your pancreas is actually sleepy at night. You see, insulin sensitivity isn't a fixed setting. It follows a strict daily cycle where it reaches its absolute peak in the morning and throughout the early afternoon. As the sun begins to set and the light fades, your brain starts producing melatonin to prepare your systems for restorative sleep. This is where the biology gets really interesting. Melatonin has a direct, inhibitory effect on insulin. It essentially acts as a chemical signal that tells your pancreas to power down and stop secreting so much insulin. To truly understand the impact of this, let's look at a what-if scenario that plays out in households every single day. Imagine eating a generous bowl of pasta at 1 p.m. for lunch versus eating that exact same bowl of pasta at 9 p.m. for a late dinner. Clinical research shows that the evening meal can produce a glucose spike that is 15% to 20% higher than the midday meal, despite the ingredients being identical. By consuming heavy carbohydrates late at night, you are effectively forcing your body to manage a massive influx of sugar at the exact moment its metabolic cleanup crew has already clocked out for the day. This leads to elevated blood sugar levels that linger throughout the night, which can disrupt your sleep quality and lead to long-term weight gain. The pro tip here, or the nuance layer that separates enthusiasts from experts, is the concept of front-loading your carbohydrates. If you know you're going to enjoy a sandwich, a bowl of rice, or a piece of fruit, the goal is to shift that consumption to your breakfast or lunch window when your insulin sensitivity is at its biological maximum. A great rule of thumb is to aim to finish your last carbohydrate-heavy meal at least 3 hours before your head hits the pillow. This ensures your glucose levels have returned to a stable baseline before you enter the deep, fat-burning state of sleep. But let's be realistic. Life happens. Maybe you have a late celebration, a big family dinner, or a special event where a late-night starch is unavoidable. Are you just stuck with that inevitable spike? Not at all. There is a powerful physical hack you can perform immediately after your meal to burn that sugar off before it even has a chance to settle into your bloodstream. We call it the movement protocol, and it's perhaps the most active way to take control of your metabolic health. Most people have been conditioned to believe that they need a grueling 60-minute sweat session at the gym to earn their calories or burn off a heavy meal. But that is simply not the case when it comes to blood sugar management. In reality, you don't need high-intensity cardio. You just need to activate the right muscle groups at the precise moment your body needs them. The core concept here is understanding that once you eat, glucose begins to flood your bloodstream. If you choose to sit still on the couch or remain at your desk, that glucose lingers in your blood, causing a spike until insulin eventually arrives to push that excess energy into your fat cells for storage. However, if you move your muscles within a window of 15 to 30 minutes after finishing your meal, something incredible happens. Your muscles can actually pull that glucose out of the blood directly to use as immediate fuel, bypassing the need for a massive insulin surge. This is what we call your natural glucose disposal system. The most accessible version of this is the simple 10-minute stroll. Research indicates that a light walk after dinner can lower your post-meal glucose peak by as much as 22%. It isn't about the intensity of the walk or how many calories you're burning. It's entirely about the timing and keeping the sugar gates in your muscles open while the glucose is at its highest concentration. But for those of you who work in an office or find yourself stuck in meetings, there is a fascinating, nuanced layer involving a secret weapon, the soleus muscle in your calf. Groundbreaking research from the University of Houston has discovered that Soleus push-ups, which essentially involve doing repetitive calf raises while staying seated, are incredibly effective at soaking up blood glucose. Because of the unique way the soleus muscle is physiologically wired, it can remain active for extended periods without fatiguing, fueled almost entirely by local blood glucose and fats without requiring a heavy insulin response. This means you can literally walk off your lunch while sitting in a boardroom. Using movement is the most active way to blunt a spike in real time. But what if you could actually protect your system while you're still in the middle of your meal? It turns out that by simply changing the specific order in which you pick up your fork and approach the food on your plate, you can create a biological shield. Before we move on, let's look at the food pairing and sequencing principle, which might just be the most effortless hack in this entire blueprint. This is perhaps the most powerful hidden strategy in the entire bunch, and it is a total paradigm shift because it's not about what you eat, but the specific order in which you eat it. To understand the core concept of the fiber buffer, I want you to visualize your stomach as a funnel leading into your small intestine. If you put starches or sugars in first, like starting your meal with the bread basket, they slip right through that funnel, hitting your small intestine almost immediately and causing a rapid surge of glucose into your blood. However, if you lead with fiber and protein, they act like a biological mesh or a buffer at the bottom of that funnel. This physical barrier slows down the gastric emptying process, ensuring that when the starches finally arrive, they have to wait their turn. The sequencing rule is a simple, three-step hierarchy that you can apply to almost any meal. Start with your vegetables for fiber, move on to your fats and proteins, and save your starches and sugars for the very end. By simply eating your salad and chicken before you touch your potato or rice, you can reduce your peak glucose level by an astonishing 73%. The beauty of this is that you aren't depriving yourself of the potato. You are simply building a biological filter that transforms how your body perceives it. This leads us to the naked carb rule. You should never let a starch travel through your system alone. If you're going to have a slice of bread, never eat it naked. Always clothe it in healthy fats like avocado or a quality protein like turkey. Adding just 25 grams of protein to a carb-heavy meal can blunt the resulting glucose response by nearly 50%. The nuance layer. Here is where most people get slightly off track. The common mistake is mixing everything together into one big, multi-ingredient bite. While pairing, your food is certainly better than eating carbs in isolation. Deconstructed, eating is the true gold standard for metabolic control. This means actually finishing your broccoli first, then moving to your salmon, and only then picking up your fork for the rice. This disciplined sequencing ensures the fiber barrier is fully established before the glucose arrives. It's an effortless way to protect your energy levels without changing a single calorie on your plate. Now, as we approach our final strategy, we're going to look at how a simple trick in your kitchen can actually change the chemical nature of your food before it even reaches your mouth. Finally, let's talk about a bit of kitchen alchemy. You can actually change the chemical structure of your food after it's cooked. When you cook starches like potatoes, pasta, or rice, the starch molecules expand. If you eat them hot, they are very easy to digest. However, if you refrigerate them for at least 12 hours, something called retrogradation happens. The starches crystallize and turn into resistant starch. Resistant starch literally resists digestion in the small intestine. Instead of turning into sugar, it travels to the large intestine where it feeds your good gut bacteria. When you reheat those leftovers the next day, the resistant starch stays intact. You are essentially eating a starch that behaves like a fiber. This can reduce the insulin spike by 40% to 50%. We've covered a lot of ground today. Let's recap your new 24-hour metabolic strategy. 1. Prepare your starches a day early and cool them to create resistant starch. 2. Start your meal with a glass of diluted vinegar. 3. Sequence your plate. Veggies first, then protein, then your carbs. 4. Time it right. Keep your heaviest carbs at lunch. 5. Move. Take a 10-minute walk or do some sitting calf raises right after you finish. You don't have to do all of these at once to see a difference. Pick one today. Maybe it's the post-meal walk. Maybe it's the vinegar. Small changes in how you eat can lead to massive changes in how you feel. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit the subscribe button and the bell icon. We're constantly diving into the latest longevity and metabolic science to help you take control of your health. Now, go enjoy that sourdough toast. Just remember the vinegar first. See you in the next one.